Well, it's an interesting story because we found it not looking for it, like sometimes happens.
A few years ago, we were working on San Nicolas Island, explicitly looking for really ancient sites, 10,000, 12,000-year-old sites.
We were out looking at old soils. We were looking for the earliest evidence of human occupation.
This was sort of a different way of doing archaeology because the really big, obvious occupation sites, the shell middens, are usually up on top of the dunes, and we weren't worried about those.
So we're following these soils and we divvy it up. We don't all want to survey the exact same area. I shot up a canyon and went towards the inland.
I was walking along the edge of the sea cliff and I looked down and I saw a whale rib protruding from the sea cliff.
And I see John, and John has this smirk on his face, and he's doing one of these with his fingers for me to come where he is. And I go, oh no, what did he find now?
I thought it was a fossil, and I thought, you know, that's pretty cool. It looks like a whale fossil. So I climbed down the cliff to look at it, and underneath it was the edge of a redwood box. And one side had already fallen off, and so the contents of the redwood box were exposed. And I could see some shiny things in there. It was sort of in the shade, but I reached in and I pulled out an object, and it was a piece of carved soapstone, an effigy, an unusual object. I reached in and pulled out another shiny object, and it was a piece of old green bottle glass. And then I reached in and I pulled out one more, and it was a copper button, a very old copper button.
So we knew we weren't looking at anything very early, but something probably historical.
And at that point I realized, like, you know, stop pulling things out of the box.
But it was also in an area that the rain travels through, and it was receiving a whole bunch of erosion.
These objects were not going to make it through the winter.
It was actually raining that day.
We just stopped what we were doing and decided we'd better salvage these boxes.
There was a feeling of euphoria when we discover it, but almost a feeling of dread when we figured out what we had to do in a short time frame, and that if we blew it, we were blowing it not only for ourselves, but perhaps for all of humankind, perhaps for everybody interested in the Channel Islands, and certainly Native peoples. So we felt this overwhelming responsibility to get it done right.
And the only thing we had time to do under that circumstance was to expose them, map them, and we took a metal sign, slipped it under the one box, and dropped it into a banker's box.
We decided only to extract them whole and then take them back to the laboratory for further excavation.
We were extraordinarily excited. You have to understand that I'm Norwegian mostly, and my granddad's name was Old Stoneface, so we're not as emotional as some people. So I wasn't jumping up and down or screaming, but we were very excited. Even in the field, we had some sense of the magnitude of the discovery, but the true magnitude only emerged in the lab.
I wasn't there for the removal of the boxes from the cliff faces, but I was really lucky to be there as the tops were being lifted off of the boxes.
During the excavations, this was a constant feeling of euphoria because every time I moved soil off, an incredible discovery was found.
The mood was tense and very, very exciting because it seemed like one thing kept popping out after another.
I mean, I was able to excavate a jewelry box. Oh gosh. Oh God. Oh. I was able to excavate these ornately carved fish hooks.
There was an abalone shell with tons of jewelry.
Multiple times where I would just lean back in disbelief of what we were doing.
We were in constant state of surprise and shock that there was more stuff, and it was even more interesting than the last thing we found. There were glass beads, glass arrowheads.
A bunch of the points that are in the redwood box cache are made from the curve of these kinds of bottles. One of the pieces has a side seam and a general shape that puts it as a Hamilton mineral water bottle, which only began being produced by about 1809.
We had whistles, we had knives that were still hafted with redwood handles, we had brass buttons, we had all kinds of things.
We knew that we were touching and taking things out that somebody had painstakingly put in there, something that somebody had made and placed in the box and gone to a lot of trouble to hide away.